They say blood is thicker than water, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes blood can drown you faster than any ocean. My name is Cassandra Mitchell, and I'm about to tell you how my own family tried to steal my entire future, $1 at a time. I spent 8 years in the military. 8 years bleeding, sweating, and sacrificing everything for this country while my family back home lived their comfortable suburban dream. What I didn't know was that my dream was funding theirs. And when I finally discovered the truth, I didn't just cut them off. I buried them so deep in their own greed that they're still digging themselves out. This isn't just a story about money. It's about the moment I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who will destroy you without blinking. And when that happens, you have two choices: become their victim forever or become their worst nightmare. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in Afghanistan, nestled between routine military correspondence and spam about extended car warranties. The subject line read, "Urgent Family Matter," from my mother's email address, the same address she'd used to send me care packages and birthday wishes for the past 3 years of my deployment. I was sitting in the communications tent, sand still gritty between my teeth from the morning patrol, when I opened what would become the first domino in a chain reaction that would reshape everything I thought I knew about family. "Sweetheart," it began, in that syrupy tone my mother Diane always used when she wanted something, "I hope you're staying safe over there. We miss you terribly and can't wait for you to come home. I'm writing because we need to discuss something important about Marcus's wedding. As you know, he's found the most wonderful girl in Jennifer, and they're planning their dream wedding for next spring. The venue they want is absolutely perfect, but it's quite expensive. We've been looking at your savings account, and we think it would be beautiful if you could contribute to making their special day magical. After all, family comes first, and this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for your brother." I stared at the screen, reading the words again. Looking at my savings account. The phrase sat in my stomach like a lead weight. I'd given my parents access to my military savings account before my deployment, a decision born of trust and practicality. If something happened to me overseas, I wanted them to handle my affairs. If I needed them to pay bills or manage emergencies back home, they could help. It was supposed to be a safety net, a bridge between my military life and the home I'd left behind. The account currently held just over $600,000, 8 years of military pay, combat bonuses, hazard pay, and most importantly, the money I'd saved by living in barracks, eating at mess halls, and spending my deployments focused on my future rather than the present. Every dollar represented a day I'd chosen duty over comfort, service over luxury. It was my ticket to the life I'd dreamed of after discharge, a house with a white picket fence, maybe graduate school, definitely a future where I could breathe without worrying about money. And my mother was asking me to hand it over for my brother's wedding? I closed the laptop and walked outside into the Afghan heat, the sun beating down on the military compound like a furnace. Around me, soldiers went about their daily routines, cleaning weapons, running drills, maintaining the machinery that kept us alive in this hostile place. These people understood sacrifice. They understood earning what you had through blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. They understood the value of a dollar earned in danger, far from home and family. But apparently my family back in suburban Ohio didn't understand any of that. I'd grown up in Columbus, Ohio, in a middle-class neighborhood where my father, David, worked as a regional manager for an insurance company, and my mother stayed home to manage the household, and more importantly, to manage appearances. Our house was the one with the perfectly manicured lawn, the one where holiday decorations went up before anyone else's, the one where dinner parties were staged productions designed to impress the neighbors. Diane Mitchell was the kind of woman who measured success by how envious she could make other women, and David was content to write the checks that funded her social climbing. Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, had always been the golden child. Star quarterback in high school, business degree from Ohio State, management position handed to him at Dad's company straight out of college. He lived in a downtown Columbus condo that our parents helped finance, drove a BMW that was an early graduation present, and had never worked a day in his life without the family safety net stretched out beneath him. I, on the other hand, had been the problem child. Not because I was rebellious or difficult, but because I was independent. When I announced at 18 that I was joining the Army instead of going to college, the dinner table had gone silent for a full 30 seconds. My mother's fork had actually clattered against her plate. "The Army, Cassandra," she had said, as if I had announced I was joining a traveling circus. "But what about college? What about finding a nice husband? What about your future?" What she meant was, what about our reputation? What would the neighbors think when their daughter was overseas carrying a rifle instead of carrying a sorority paddle? How would that look at the country club? But I'd persisted. I'd enlisted, completed basic training at Fort Benning, specialized in communications, and thrown myself into military life with the determination of someone who finally found where they belonged. The Army had given me structure, purpose, and most importantly, financial independence. For the first time in my life, I wasn't dependent on my family's approval or their checkbook. Or so I thought. Back in the communications tent, I reopened the email and read it again, this time paying attention to the details I'd glossed over in my initial shock. The venue they wanted was the Blackwell Castle, a restored 19th century mansion outside Cincinnati that charged $30,000 just for the privilege of walking through their doors. The flowers alone would cost $15,000. The dress Jennifer had fallen in love with was a custom Vera Wang creation with a price tag that could fund a small car. All told, my mother estimated they needed about $250,000 to give Marcus and Jennifer their dream wedding. $250,000 for one day, for a party. I thought about the soldiers sleeping in cots around me, men and women who sent most of their paychecks home to families struggling to pay rent and buy groceries. I thought about my squad leader, Sergeant Rodriguez, who worked double shifts in the communications center to earn extra money because his wife was pregnant with their third child and they couldn't afford the hospital bills. I thought about Private Johnson, barely 19, who ate one meal a day for the last week of every month because he'd sent too much money home to his mother and didn't have enough left for proper food. And my family wanted me to blow $250,000 on flowers and cake? I picked up my satellite phone and dialed home, calculating the time difference. It would be evening in Ohio, probably dinner time. The phone rang 3 times before my mother's cheerful voice answered. "Cassandra, what a wonderful surprise! We were just talking about you." "I got your email about Marcus's wedding." "Oh, good. I was hoping you'd call. Isn't it exciting? Jennifer is such a lovely girl and Marcus is absolutely smitten. They're planning their dream wedding for next spring. The venue they want is absolutely perfect, but it's quite expensive. We've been looking at your savings account, and we think it would be beautiful if you could contribute to making their special day magical. After all, family comes first, and this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for your brother." I stared at the screen, reading the words again, looking at my savings account. The phrase sat in my stomach like a lead weight. I'd given my parents access to my military savings account before my deployment, a decision born of trust and practicality. If something happened to me overseas, I wanted them to handle my affairs. If I needed them to pay bills or manage emergencies back home, they could help. It was supposed to be a safety net, a bridge between my military life and the home I'd left behind. The account currently held just over $600,000, 8 years of military pay, combat bonuses, hazard pay, and most importantly, the money I'd saved by living in barracks, eating at mess halls, and spending my deployments focused on my future rather than the present. Every dollar represented a day I'd chosen duty over comfort, service over luxury. It was my ticket to the life I dreamed of after discharge, a house with a white picket fence, maybe graduate school, definitely a future where I could breathe without worrying about money. And my mother was asking me to hand it over for my brother's wedding. I closed the laptop and walked outside into the Afghan heat, the sun beating down on the military compound like a furnace. Around me, soldiers went about their daily routines, cleaning weapons, running drills, maintaining the machinery that kept us alive in this hostile place. These people understood sacrifice. They understood earning what you had through blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. They understood the value of a dollar earned in danger, far from home and family. But apparently my family back in suburban Ohio didn't understand any of that. I'd grown up in Columbus, Ohio, in a middle-class neighborhood where my father, David, worked as a regional manager for an insurance company, and my mother stayed home to manage the household and, more importantly,
to manage appearances. Our house was the one with the perfectly manicured lawn, the one where holiday decorations went up before anyone else's, the one where dinner parties were staged productions designed to impress the neighbors. Diane Mitchell was the kind of woman who measured success by how envious she could make other women, and David was content to write the checks that funded her social climbing. Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, had always been the golden child. Star quarterback in high school, business degree from Ohio State, management position handed to him at Dad's company straight out of college. He lived in a downtown Columbus condo that our parents helped finance, drove a BMW that was an early graduation present, and had never worked a day in his life without the family safety net stretched out beneath him. I, on the other hand, had been the problem child. Not because I was rebellious or difficult, but because I was independent. When I announced at 18 that I was joining the Army instead of going to college, the dinner table had gone silent for a full 30 seconds. My mother
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mom, how much money do you think is in my savings account right now? Another pause, longer this time. In the background, I could hear the sounds of suburban dinner time, the clink of silverware against plates, the murmur of a television, the normal sounds of a family gathered around a table. The family I was fighting for, sleeping on a cot thousands of miles away from home. I'm not sure of the exact amount, sweetheart. Your father handles the financial details. Put Dad on the phone. He's in the middle of eating. Put him on the phone, Mom, now. I heard muffled conversation, the sound of the phone being passed, and then my father's voice, carefully neutral. Hey, Cass, how are things over there? Dad, I want to know exactly how much money is in my savings account right now. Well, let's see. I heard the sound of papers shuffling, a computer keyboard clicking. Looks like there's about 350,000. My vision went white around the edges. 350,000? That's right. Dad, when I left for this deployment 18 months ago, there was almost 600,000 in that account. Where did the other 250,000 go? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Well, there have been some expenses. Marcus needed help with his condo payments when the market shifted. Your mother had some medical bills that insurance didn't cover completely. We had to replace the roof on the house. Are you telling me you've spent $250,000 of my money without asking me? It's not like that, Cass. It's family money. We all contribute to the family, and the family takes care of everyone. That's how it's always worked. How it's always worked. I thought about all the times, growing up, when I'd needed money for school activities, sports equipment, or just basic necessities, and how the answer had always been the same. We don't have the budget for that right now, Cassandra. Maybe next month, maybe next year, maybe if you get a job and earn it yourself. But apparently, there had always been budget for Marcus's needs, Marcus's car, Marcus's apartment, Marcus's business school loans, Marcus's lifestyle. I never agreed to contribute my military savings to the family fund, I said, my voice deadly calm. You gave us access to the account for emergencies, for legitimate expenses, not to subsidize Marcus's life choices. Cassandra, you're being dramatic. We're family. Family takes care of each other. I looked around the military compound, at the soldiers who were my chosen family now, who would die for each other without asking for receipts or justification. Family doesn't steal from each other, Dad. It's not stealing if I hung up. For the next hour, I sat in the communications tent, staring at my laptop screen and trying to process what I'd learned. My family had been systematically draining my savings account for almost 2 years, treating it like their personal ATM. Every dollar I'd saved through discipline and sacrifice, every combat bonus I'd earned by putting my life on the line, every penny I'd scrimped together by eating military rations while my squad mates ordered pizza, had been flowing back to Ohio to fund my family's lifestyle. And now they wanted the rest of it for Marcus's wedding. I opened my banking app and logged into my account, scrolling through 18 months of transactions. What I saw made my stomach turn.
Withdrawals for $5,000 here, $10,000 there, $25,000 for emergency home repairs that I later realized had been a kitchen renovation I'd seen photos of on my mother's social media. Regular monthly withdrawals of $3,000 that corresponded exactly with Marcus's condo payments. They hadn't just stolen from me, they'd been systematic about it, organized, careful to keep the amounts low enough that they wouldn't trigger any automatic alerts, but high enough to make a real difference in their lifestyle. The final straw was a withdrawal from just 2 weeks ago, $15,000 for medical emergency. I remembered the frantic phone call from my mother about my father needing urgent surgery. How worried I was, how I'd spent sleepless nights wondering if Dad would be okay while I was stuck on the other side of the world. The surgery that turned out to be elective cosmetic work to remove some aging spots on his hands because he was self-conscious about them at work. They'd used my love for them as a weapon against me. I closed the laptop and walked to my bunk where I kept a small metal box with my most important papers. Inside was a folder containing all my discharge paperwork, ready for when my service ended in 6 months. I'd been planning to use my savings to buy a house near Fort Carson in Colorado, where I'd been offered a civilian position with the Army Corps of Engineers. It was a good job with excellent benefits, the kind of stable career that would let me build a life on my own terms. That dream was gone. With only $350,000 left and my family circling like vultures for the rest of it, I'd be lucky to afford a decent apartment and a reliable car. But as I sat there in the darkness of my bunk, something else began to take shape in my mind. A cold, clear understanding of exactly what kind of people my family really were. And with that understanding came something I'd never felt before towards the people who raised me. Pure, focused anger. They thought they were dealing with the same naive 18-year-old who left Ohio 8 years ago. They thought military service was a phase, a rebellious period before I came home and settled into the role they'd always envisioned for me, the spinster daughter who took care of aging parents and provided financial support for Marcus's growing family. They thought I was still their little girl, still dependent on their approval, still willing to sacrifice my own dreams for their comfort. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The next morning, I requested a video call home. This time, I wanted to see their faces when I told them what I'd decided about Marcus's wedding contribution. I wanted to watch their expressions when they realized their cash cow was about to break free from the barn. The call connected at 7 p.m. Ohio time, and I found myself looking at the familiar backdrop of our family living room. The same cream-colored walls, the same floral sofa my mother had bought to impress her book club, the same family photos arranged just so on the mantelpiece. Marcus was there too, his arm around a blonde woman I assumed was Jennifer, both of them beaming with the excitement of people planning a party they couldn't afford. "Cassandra!" my mother exclaimed, as if we hadn't had that difficult conversation the day before. "Look who's here! Marcus and Jennifer wanted to thank you personally for being so generous about the wedding." Marcus leaned forward, his smile wide and confident.
He'd inherited my father's easy charm and my mother's assumption that the world owed him whatever he wanted. "Hey, sis, Mom told me you're going to help us out with the wedding. I can't tell you how much that means to us. Jennifer's been dreaming of this day since she was little, haven't you, babe?" Jennifer nodded enthusiastically, her engagement ring catching the light. Even through the grainy video connection, I could see it was enormous. "I've been looking at your mom's old photo albums, and I just know our wedding is going to be even more beautiful than hers was. The venue is absolutely magical, and with your contribution, we can make everything perfect." I let them talk. I let them paint their picture of the perfect wedding, funded by their soldier sister, who was proud to support their happiness. I watched my parents nod approvingly, saw the way they basked in Marcus's gratitude and Jennifer's excitement. I observed a family that had convinced itself that taking my money wasn't theft, it was love. When they finally finished describing the flowers, the band, the ice sculpture, and the horse-drawn carriage that would carry the happy couple away from their fairy tale ceremony, I smiled. "It sounds beautiful," I said. "Really, truly beautiful." Their faces lit up with relief and joy.
I'm so glad you think so, my mother said. I knew you'd understand how important this is. Oh, I understand completely, I said, still smiling. I understand exactly what kind of people you are. The change in the room was immediate. Smiles faltered. Marcus's arm tightened around Jennifer's shoulders. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. What do you mean by that? My mother asked, her voice carefully controlled. I mean that you've been stealing from me for almost 2 years. I mean that you've taken $250,000 from my savings account without permission. I mean that you've been using my military service, my sacrifice, my willingness to put my life on the line for this country to fund your middle-class fantasy life. Cassandra, I'm not finished, I said, and something in my voice made them all go silent. You want me to contribute to Marcus's wedding. Fine. Here's my contribution. Not one more penny of my money will ever flow into this family. Not for weddings, not for emergencies, not for anything. You've had your last withdrawal from the Bank of Cassandra. Marcus found his voice first. You can't be serious. It's a wedding, Cass. It's important. You're right, I said. It is important. It's so important that you should pay for it yourselves. But we can't afford. Then you can't afford to have it. I watched Jennifer's face crumple, saw my mother's carefully maintained composure begin to crack. My father was staring at something off camera, probably calculating exactly how much they'd counted on my money for their various plans and commitments. Cassandra, I'm not finished, I said, and something in my voice made them all go silent. You want me to contribute to Marcus's wedding. Fine. Here's my contribution. Not one more penny of my money will ever flow into this family. Not for weddings, not for emergencies, not for anything. You've had your last withdrawal from the Bank of Cassandra. Marcus found his voice first. You can't be serious. It's a wedding, Cass. It's important. You're right, I said. It is important. It's so important that you should pay for it yourselves. But we can't afford. Then you can't afford to have it. I watched Jennifer's face crumple, saw my mother's carefully maintained composure begin to crack. My father was staring at something off camera, probably calculating exactly how much they'd counted on my money for their various plans and commitments. Cassandra, you're being cruel. We're your family. We love you. Love, I repeated. You love me so much that you stole from me? You love me so much that you lied to me about medical emergencies to access my savings? You love me so much that the first thing you ask when I call home isn't how I'm doing in a war zone, but how much money I'm willing to hand over for Marcus's party? It's not a party, it's a wedding, Jennifer said, tears starting to flow. It's the most important day of my life. Then maybe you should have saved for it yourself instead of spending the last 2 years planning a wedding you couldn't pay for. The room erupted. Marcus started shouting about family loyalty. Jennifer dissolved into full-blown sobs. My mother launched into a speech about sacrifice and love and how she'd given me everything, and this was how I repaid her. My father just sat there, calculating, probably already working on Plan B. I watched it all with the detached interest of someone observing a documentary about people she'd never met. These weren't my family. These were strangers who happened to share my DNA and my bank account information. When the shouting died down, I spoke again. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, I'm changing all the access codes on my accounts. I'm removing all of your names from all of my financial documents. What money is left in my savings account will stay there until I return from deployment, and then I'll use it to start my actual life, the life I've been working toward for 8 years, while you've been spending my paychecks. You can't do this, my mother whispered. We're your parents. We raised you. You raised a soldier, and soldiers don't abandon their posts, but they also don't fund the enemy. I ended the call. In the silence of the communications tent, I sat back and took my first full breath in 24 hours. Around me, the familiar sounds of military life continued, distant voices, the hum of generators, the crackle of radio communications, my real family, my chosen family, going about their business of keeping each other safe and getting the job done. I had 5 months left on my deployment, 5 months to plan my next move carefully and strategically. Because cutting off the money was just the beginning. They'd stolen from me, lied to me, and treated my sacrifice like their personal windfall. And if there was one thing 8 years of military service had taught me, it was this. When someone declares war on you, you don't just defend. You win. The war for my life had just begun, and I intended to be the last person standing when the smoke cleared. The silence that followed my declaration lasted exactly 18 hours. Then the assault began. My phone started buzzing at 3 a.m. local time, with text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Friends of the family, neighbors, people from my high school who hadn't spoken to me in years, all suddenly very concerned about my relationship with my parents. The messages all followed the same script, which told me everything I needed to know about who was orchestrating this campaign.
Your parents are such good people. Whatever happened, I'm sure you can work it out. Family is everything, Cass. Don't let pride get in the way of love. By the time I deleted the 15th message, I was actually impressed. Diane Mitchell had mobilized her entire social network in less than a day, spinning a narrative that painted me as the ungrateful daughter who was breaking her poor parents' hearts over money. She'd always been gifted at manipulation, but this was masterful work. Then came the emails. My personal account, my military account, even my old college email that I hadn't checked in years, suddenly flooded with messages from extended family members I barely knew. Cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends, all expressing their disappointment in my behavior and their hope that I'd come to my senses. The crown jewel was a message from my grandmother, my father's mother, who lived in a nursing home in Cleveland. Grandma Rose had always been my favorite relative, the only family member who'd supported my decision to join the military. Her email was short and devastating. Cassandra, your parents told me about the situation with Marcus's wedding. I'm so disappointed in you. After everything they've done for you, this is how you repay them? I thought I raised your father better than to have a daughter who would abandon family in their time of need. I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something crack inside my chest. Then I picked up my phone and called the nursing home. Shady Oaks Care Center, this is Beverly speaking. Hi, Beverly, this is Cassandra Mitchell. I'd like to speak with my grandmother, Rose Mitchell, if she's available. Oh, hello, dear. She's right here in the activities room. Let me get her for you. A few minutes later, my grandmother's familiar voice came on the line. Cassie? Oh, honey, it's so good to hear from you. How are you doing over there in that dangerous place? I'm fine, Grandma. I got your email about Marcus's wedding. There was a pause. What email, sweetheart? The one you sent me about being disappointed in me for not supporting the family. Cassie, I don't know how to use email. I don't even have a computer. What are you talking about? And there it was. They weren't just rallying their social network against me. They were impersonating elderly relatives to emotionally manipulate me into compliance. My own parents had hacked my grandmother's old email account, which she'd created years ago and forgotten about, to send me guilt-laden messages in her name. Grandma, what did Dad tell you about the wedding situation? He called yesterday and said Marcus was getting married to a lovely girl and they were hoping you could help with some of the costs since you'd been saving up your military money. He said you'd gotten upset about it for some reason. I told him that didn't sound like you at all. You were always such a generous girl. Grandma, did he tell you that they've been taking money from my savings account for 2 years without asking me? What? No, honey. He didn't mention anything like that. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining the real situation to my grandmother, watching her voice grow colder as she processed the information. By the end of the call, she was livid. Those idiots, she said, using language I'd never heard from her before. That money is your future, Cassie. You earned every penny of it by serving your country. How dare they touch it without permission? They think it's family money, Grandma. Family money, my foot.
Your grandfather and I never took a dime from your father that he didn't offer freely. That's not how decent families operate." When I hung up from that call, I felt something shift inside me. The doubt that had been nagging at me since yesterday, the small voice wondering if maybe I was being too harsh, finally went silent. They weren't just stealing from me, they were weaponizing the entire family against me, using lies and manipulation to isolate me and force me back into compliance. That night, I made my first strategic move. I created a group email that included every person who'd contacted me in the last 24 hours. Extended family, family friends, neighbors, high school acquaintances, everyone who'd been recruited into Diane's pressure campaign. The subject line read, "The truth about the Mitchell family financial situation." The body of the email was simple and factual. I explained that my parents had been given emergency access to my military savings account and had used that access to withdraw over $250,000 without my knowledge or consent over the past 18 months. I attached screenshots of the bank transactions with account numbers redacted but dates and amounts clearly visible. I included copies of the fake emails sent from my grandmother's old email account, which she'd created years ago and forgotten about, to send me guilt-laden messages in her name. I added one final paragraph. "I want to be very clear about something. This is not a family dispute over wedding costs. This is theft. My parents have stolen from me systematically and deliberately, and when I discovered their actions, they launched a campaign to manipulate and pressure me into accepting their behavior. I will not be contributing to Marcus's wedding or any other family expenses, not because I don't love my family, but because I refuse to enable people who view my military service as their personal ATM. If you've been contacted by my parents about this situation, now you know the facts. What you choose to do with this information is up to you." I sent the email at 11 p.m. Ohio time and went to bed. By morning, my parents were in crisis mode. The first sign was a frantic voicemail from my mother at 6 a.m. local time, her voice shaking with rage and panic. "Cassandra, how could you? How could you air our private family business to everyone we know? You've humiliated us. You have destroyed our reputation in the community. Your father might lose his job over this. Is that what you want? To ruin your entire family over money?" The second sign was a formal cease and desist letter from a Columbus law firm delivered to my unit's legal officer within hours of my email. The letter demanded that I stop spreading defamatory statements about my parents and threatened legal action if I continued to harass them. The third sign was a phone call from Marcus, his voice tight with fury. "Cass, what the hell is wrong with you? Jennifer is in tears. Her parents are asking questions about why she's marrying into a family with financial problems. You might have just destroyed my relationship over your petty revenge." "Petty revenge?" I asked. "Marcus, they stole from me." "They didn't steal anything. It's family money. We all contribute to the family."
When have you ever contributed to the family? I contribute by being successful, by making mom and dad proud, by giving them grandchildren and carrying on the family name. And I contribute by funding your lifestyle with my combat pay. You're being ridiculous. It's not like you were going to spend that money anyway. You live on a military base. You don't have any expenses. That response crystallized everything for me. Marcus genuinely believed that because I was single, because I lived simply, because I'd chosen a life of service over a life of consumption, my money was somehow communal property. In his mind, I was the family's designated breadwinner, existing to support his dreams while having none of my own. "Marcus," I said very calmly, "I want you to listen to me carefully. That money you think I wasn't going to spend anyway, it was going to buy me a house. It was going to pay for graduate school. It was going to give me the security to build a life after the military. You didn't just take my money, you took my future. You can always make more money, and you can always pay for your own wedding." I hung up and immediately called my unit's legal officer, Captain Sarah Chen, who'd been dealing with my parents' legal threats all morning. "Mitchell," she said when I knocked on her office door, "please tell me this family drama isn't going to turn into a bigger legal mess." "Actually, ma'am, I think it might.
but not the way my parents are hoping. I explained the situation to Captain Chen, showing her the same bank records I'd shared with the family. She listened with the careful attention of someone who'd seen plenty of military families destroyed by financial manipulation. Mitchell, what your parents did constitutes financial abuse at minimum, possibly fraud, depending on how the account was set up. If you wanted to pursue criminal charges, I'm not interested in sending them to prison, I said, but I am interested in making sure they can't do this to anyone else. What do you mean? I mean, I want to know all my legal options for protecting my assets and making sure this never happens again. Captain Chen leaned back in her chair. Well, you could start by filing a formal complaint with their local police department about the unauthorized withdrawals. That creates an official record even if you don't want to press charges immediately. You could also file a complaint with the Ohio Attorney General's office about elder abuse, since they used your grandmother's email account without permission. What about the cease and desist letter? That's toothless. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. If they want to sue you for telling people they stole from you, they'd have to prove they didn't steal from you. Good luck with that when you have bank records. That afternoon, I spent 3 hours on the phone with various law enforcement agencies in Ohio, filing reports and creating an official record of my parents' actions. I wasn't ready to press criminal charges yet, but I wanted the groundwork laid in case they escalated further. They escalated further. 2 days later, I received a call from my unit's commanding officer, Colonel Williams. Someone had contacted my unit claiming that I was experiencing a mental health crisis and might be a danger to myself or others. They'd provided specific details about my deployment stress, my isolation from my family, and my increasingly erratic behavior. The Army takes mental health seriously, especially for soldiers on deployment. I found myself sitting across from the unit psychologist, Dr. Martinez, explaining why my own parents had tried to have me declared mentally unstable. So, let me understand this, Dr. Martinez said, reviewing his notes. Your family has been systematically withdrawing money from your savings account without permission, and when you confronted them about it, they responded by trying to have you declared mentally unfit? That's correct, sir. And the person who called in the mental health concern was able to provide detailed information about your financial situation, your family relationships, and your deployment status? Information that would only be available to someone with intimate knowledge of my personal life. Dr. Martinez leaned back in his chair. Mitchell, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen soldiers break down from combat stress, homesickness, financial problems, relationship issues, you name it. I've never seen a soldier as mentally stable and clear-headed as you are right now while dealing with what amounts to a coordinated attack on their character and finances by their own family. The psychological evaluation cleared me completely, but it also opened my eyes to how far my parents were willing to go. They'd tried to have me declared mentally incompetent, which would have given them legal control over my finances again. If Dr. Martinez had been less experienced or less perceptive, I might have found myself in a military psychiatric hold while my parents cleaned out what remained of my accounts. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my grandmother. Grandma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, sweetheart. How much money have you saved up? There was a long pause. Why do you ask? Because I think Dad has been stealing from you too. Another pause. Longer this time. Cassie, how did you know? The story came out slowly, painfully. For the past 3 years, my father had been managing my grandmother's finances, helping her pay bills and manage her limited investments. He'd convinced her to give him power of attorney for financial matters, ostensibly to make things easier as she aged. What he'd actually done was systematically drain her retirement savings to supplement the family lifestyle. Her nest egg of nearly $200,000 had dwindled to less than $30,000.
When she'd questioned the withdrawals, he'd told her they were for her medical care, for improvements to her nursing home room, for investments that would benefit her in the long run. "I trusted him," she whispered. "He's my son. I never thought." Grandma, how much do you need to live comfortably for the rest of your life? The nursing home costs about $4,000 a month, and my Social Security covers most of that. If I had about $50,000 for emergencies and little extras, I'd be fine. I did some quick math in my head. With my current savings balance, I could restore my grandmother's financial security and still have enough for a modest house and graduate school. It would mean giving up my dream of a perfect post-military life, but it would mean protecting the one family member who'd always supported me. "Grandma, I'm going to fix this." "Honey, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You're the only person in this family who ever treated me like I mattered. You supported my military career when everyone else called it a phase. You believed in me when no one else did. I'm not going to let Dad steal your security the way he stole mine."
The next morning, I initiated the most comprehensive financial warfare campaign of my life. First, I contacted the nursing home's billing department and set up a direct payment plan from my account to theirs, ensuring my grandmother's care would be paid for regardless of what happened to the rest of the family finances. Second, I contacted an attorney in Cleveland who specialized in elder abuse cases and provided him with all the documentation of my father's financial manipulation of my grandmother's accounts. Third, I reached out to a journalist at the Columbus Dispatch who'd written articles about financial abuse of elderly citizens and military families. Fourth, and most importantly, I started making phone calls to every organization and business that my parents were involved with. My father's employer received a detailed letter outlining his history of financial fraud against family members, along with copies of bank records and police reports. His church received similar documentation. The country club where my parents maintained their social standing got a full briefing on their financial crimes. But the masterstroke was Jennifer's family. I'd done some research and discovered that Jennifer's father was a prominent cardiologist in Cincinnati, and her mother was active in several charitable organizations that prided themselves on their ethical standards. They were exactly the kind of people who would be horrified to learn that their future son-in-law's family had been systematically stealing from a deployed soldier. I sent them a carefully crafted email with all the documentation, focusing on the fact that their daughter was unknowingly planning to marry into a family with a history of financial fraud. I made it clear that I wasn't trying to break up the engagement, but that they deserved to know the truth about the people their daughter was joining her life to. The response was immediate and devastating. Jennifer called Marcus in hysterics after her parents confronted her with my email. The fairy tale wedding was immediately put on hold pending a thorough investigation of the Mitchell family's financial situation. Her father, Dr. Peterson, insisted on meeting with my parents directly to discuss the allegations. Marcus called me in a rage that evening. "You destroyed my life," he screamed into the phone. "Jennifer's parents think I'm a criminal. They're talking about calling off the engagement. Her father wants to see every bank record, every financial document, every piece of paper related to our family's money." "Then show them," I said calmly. "You know we can't do that. Not with the way things look right now." "You mean not with the evidence of theft?" "It's not theft." "Marcus, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down with Jennifer and her parents, and you're going to tell them the truth about what you and Mom and Dad did to me and to Grandma. You're going to explain how your family operates, how you view other people's money as your personal property, how you justify taking from people who love you." "I can't do that. It would ruin everything." "Then maybe everything deserves to be ruined." I hung up and sat in the darkness of my bunk, listening to the sounds of the military compound around me. In 6 hours, it would be dawn in Ohio, and my family would wake up to a world where their lies had consequences, where their theft had victims who fought back, where their manipulation had limits. They'd declared war on me by treating my service, my sacrifice, and my future as collateral damage in their pursuit of a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Now, they were learning what it meant to fight a soldier, and I was just getting started. The next phase of my campaign began with a single phone call to Marcus's employer. He worked in management at our father's insurance company, a position he'd been handed straight out of college despite having no relevant experience. The company prided itself on its ethical standards and community involvement. I asked to speak with the human resources director. This is regarding Marcus Mitchell in your regional management division. I'm his sister, and I'm calling to inform you of some recent legal issues that may impact his employment. I provided a factual summary of the financial fraud allegations, the police reports I'd filed, and the ongoing investigation into elder abuse. I made it clear that I wasn't asking them to fire Marcus, but that they should be aware of the situation in case it escalated to criminal charges. The HR director thanked me for the information and assured me they'd look into the matter. Marcus was called into a meeting with HR and his supervisor within hours. That evening, my phone rang with a call from my mother. Her voice was different now, stripped of the manipulation and false sweetness, raw with desperation. "Cassandra, you have to stop this. Marcus might lose his job. The wedding is off. Your father's company is investigating him too. The church asked us to step down from the finance committee. Our friends won't return our calls." I'm sorry to hear that, and I meant it. Not sorry enough to stop, but sorry that it had come to this. This isn't what family does to each other. You are absolutely right. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie to each other. Family doesn't try to have each other declared mentally incompetent to cover up their crimes. We never meant for it to go this far. You meant to steal from me. You meant to use my military service to fund your lifestyle. You meant to manipulate me into accepting it when I found out. The only thing you didn't mean was to get caught. What do you want from us? It was the first honest question she had asked me since this whole situation began. I want you to understand what you did to me. I want you to face consequences for your actions, and I want to make sure you never do this to anyone else. If we paid back the money, it's too late for that. Cassandra, please, we're your parents. We love you. No, I said quietly. You loved my bank account. You loved my military salary. You loved having a daughter you could exploit without her fighting back. But you never loved me. I hung up and realized that for the first time in my adult life, I felt free. Over the next week, the destruction of my family's carefully constructed life accelerated beyond even my expectations. The local newspaper picked up the story of the military financial abuse case, running a front-page article about family members who prey on deployed soldiers. My parents' names weren't mentioned, but everyone in their social circle knew exactly who the article was about. My father was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation at his company. The church not only removed my parents from the finance committee, but asked them to consider finding a new congregation. The country club where my parents maintained their social standing got a full briefing on their financial crimes. But the masterstroke was Jennifer's family.
But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Marcus himself. He called me on a Saturday morning, his voice hollow with defeat. "Cass, I need to ask you something." "What?" "If I testify against Mom and Dad, if I cooperate with the investigation and admit what we did, will you help me?" I was quiet for a long moment, processing what he'd just said. "Help you how?" Jennifer's parents said they might consider allowing the engagement to continue if I can prove that I wasn't the mastermind behind the theft, that I was just following Mom and Dad's lead. They want me to make a full confession and commit to paying back my share of the money over time. And you're willing to do that? I don't have a choice. I love Jennifer. I can't lose her over this. There it was, the fracture in the family loyalty that I'd been waiting for. Marcus was willing to sacrifice our parents to save his relationship, just as they'd been willing to sacrifice me to fund their lifestyle. Marcus, if you testify honestly about what happened, if you admit your role and commit to making restitution, I'll consider speaking to Jennifer's parents on your behalf. Really? But I need you to understand something. This isn't forgiveness. This isn't reconciliation. This is a business transaction. You give me the truth and cooperation in exchange for a character reference. That's all. I understand. 2 days later, Marcus sat down with the police investigators and the Attorney General's office and provided a detailed confession about the family's financial crimes. He implicated our parents as the primary architects of the scheme, but took full responsibility for his own participation. He provided bank records, email communications, and a timeline of the theft that stretched back even further than I'd realized. It turned out that my parents had been testing their system on smaller accounts for years. They drained an education fund my grandmother had set up for me when I was born. They'd taken money from a joint account that was supposed to be for family emergencies. They'd even stolen from Marcus himself, using his credit cards without permission and then paying the minimum balance from their other sources of illegal income. The confession broke the case wide open, transforming what had been a family dispute into a criminal fraud investigation involving multiple victims and hundreds of thousands of dollars. My parents were arrested on a Tuesday morning, led away from their suburban home in handcuffs, while neighbors watched from behind curtains and recorded videos with their phones. The local news ran footage of the arrest that evening, with a voiceover explaining that the couple was accused of defrauding multiple family members, including their daughter who was serving overseas with the military. I watched the coverage from my bunk at Afghanistan, feeling something I hadn't expected. Sadness. Not for my parents, who'd earned their fate, but for the family we could have been if they'd chosen love over greed, honesty over manipulation. That night, I received a call from Captain Chen. "Mitchell, I wanted to let you know that we've been contacted by the prosecutor's office in Ohio. They want to know if you'd be willing to provide testimony for the case against your parents." "Yes, ma'am. I'll testify." They also wanted me to tell you that based on Marcus's confession and the evidence you provided, they're confident they can recover a significant portion of your stolen money through asset forfeiture and restitution orders. It was good news, but it felt hollow. Money could be recovered, but trust, family bonds, the naive belief that the people who raised you had your best interest at heart, those things couldn't be restored with court orders and bank transfers. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from Jennifer. "Dear Cassandra," it began, "I wanted to write to thank you for telling the truth about your family situation, even though I know it was painful for you. Marcus has told me everything, and while I'm heartbroken about the deception, I'm grateful that you were brave enough to expose it before I married into it blindly." The letter went on to explain that she and Marcus were postponing their engagement indefinitely while he worked to rebuild his life and demonstrate that he was different from his parents. She wasn't sure if they had a future together, but she wanted to give him the chance to prove himself. "I know this situation has cost you more than money. It's cost you your family. I can't imagine how difficult that must be, and I want you to know that I don't take your sacrifice lightly. You saved me from making a terrible mistake, and you did it even though it meant destroying your own family relationships. That takes a kind of courage I'm not sure I possess." I folded the letter and put it in my personal papers box, next to the discharge documents and bank statements and legal papers that now define my relationship with the people who'd raised me. 2 months later, my parents pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft. They were sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to their victims. Their house was sold to satisfy the judgment. Their retirement accounts were seized. Their cars were repossessed. The comfortable suburban life they'd built on stolen money collapsed entirely. Marcus kept his job after agreeing to pay back his portion of the theft through payroll deductions over 5 years. Jennifer eventually agreed to resume their relationship, but insisted on maintaining separate finances and signing a prenuptial agreement that protected her assets from any future Mitchell family schemes. My grandmother used the restitution money to move to a better nursing home and set up a scholarship fund for military children pursuing higher education. And me? I finished my deployment with my head held high and my future secure. The recovered money, combined with what I had left, was enough for a house, graduate school, and the life I'd always planned. But more importantly, I'd learned something that no amount of money could teach. Sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who will hurt you worst. And sometimes the only way to save yourself is to be willing to lose everything,
you thought you wanted in order to keep everything you actually need. I was no longer their daughter, their victim, or their ATM. I was free. And freedom, I discovered, was worth every penny I'd paid for it. 6 months after my parents' sentencing, I stepped off the transport plane at Dover Air Force Base for the last time as an active-duty soldier. The Delaware air was crisp and clean, carrying the promise of autumn and new beginnings. I carried my duffel bag across the tarmac, officially discharged from 8 years of military service, ready to begin the life I'd fought so hard to protect. The first thing I did was drive to Colorado. The house I'd found online was nothing like the mansion by the ocean that my former family had dreamed of, but it was perfect for me. A modest 2-bedroom ranch in Colorado Springs with a view of Pikes Peak and a mortgage I could afford without touching my restored savings account. The sellers were a military couple transferring overseas, and they'd maintain the property with the care that soldiers bring to everything they consider important. Standing in the empty living room on closing day, keys heavy in my hand, I felt something I'd never experienced before: complete ownership of my own life. Every decision from here forward would be mine. Every dollar I spent would be earned through my own work. Every relationship I built would be based on genuine connection rather than financial dependency. The silence was beautiful. I furnished the house slowly, deliberately, choosing each piece not because it would impress anyone, but because I genuinely liked it. A comfortable couch where I could read in the evenings, a dining table where I could host friends without worrying about status or appearances, a home office where I could pursue the graduate degree in engineering that would launch my civilian career. My new job with the Army Corps of Engineers was everything I'd hoped for. The work was challenging and meaningful, involving infrastructure projects that would serve communities for decades. My colleagues respected my military background and technical skills without caring about my family drama or personal history. For the first time in my adult life, I was valued purely for what I could contribute professionally, not what I could provide financially. The best part was the normalcy of it all. I woke up every morning in my own bed, drank coffee from my own kitchen, and drove to work in a car I'd bought with money I'd earned honestly. There were no frantic phone calls demanding emergency loans, no guilt trips about family obligations, no manipulation disguised as love. 3 months into my civilian life, I received a letter from the Colorado Springs Women's Veterans Association asking if I'd be interested in speaking at their annual fundraising dinner. The organization provided support services for female veterans transitioning to civilian life, and they'd heard about my story through military networks. We understand you've overcome significant challenges related to family financial abuse during your service. Your experience could provide hope and guidance for other women veterans who may be facing similar situations. I'd never considered myself a public speaker, but something about the invitation resonated. How many other service members were being exploited by their families?
How many were sending their combat pay home to people who viewed their sacrifice as personal profit? The dinner was held at the Broadmoor Hotel with an audience of about 200 women veterans, active duty service members, and community supporters. As I walked to the podium, I saw faces that reflected my own journey, women who'd chosen service over comfort, duty over convenience, sacrifice over safety. I began by talking about my military career, the pride I'd felt in serving my country, the bonds I'd formed with fellow soldiers. Then I shifted to the harder part of the story. I want to tell you about the enemy you might not recognize, I said. The one that doesn't wear a uniform or carry weapons. The enemy that attacks you with guilt instead of bullets, with manipulation instead of explosives. The enemy that lives in your own house and shares your DNA. The room was completely silent as I described the systematic theft, the lies, the emotional manipulation that had nearly destroyed my financial future. I talked about the moment I realized that love without respect isn't love at all, it's exploitation. I explained how I'd fought back not with anger or revenge, but with boundaries, truth, and the courage to walk away from people who didn't deserve access to my life. The military taught me that you never leave a soldier behind, I concluded. But sometimes the most important soldier to save is yourself.
Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is abandon a position that can't be defended and establish a new perimeter around the life you actually want to live. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. Afterward, dozens of women approached me with their own stories of family financial abuse, military benefits being stolen by relatives, guilt-based manipulation designed to extract money from service members who were trying to build stable futures. One young Marine told me her mother had been forging her signature on military family life insurance policies and cashing them without permission. A Navy veteran explained how her ex-husband was claiming her disability benefits by maintaining control of their joint accounts. An Army sergeant described how her parents were using her military housing allowance to pay for their second mortgage while she lived in base housing. Each story reinforced what I'd learned. Financial abuse of military personnel by their own families was far more common than anyone wanted to acknowledge. The very qualities that made good soldiers, loyalty, duty, selflessness, commitment to something larger than themselves, also made them vulnerable to exploitation by people who understood how to weaponize love. That night marked the beginning of what would become my second career. Working with the Veterans Association, I helped establish a financial literacy and protection program specifically designed for military families. We created workshops on recognizing financial abuse, establishing healthy boundaries with family members, and protecting military benefits from exploitation. We developed resources for service members who were being pressured to provide excessive financial support to relatives. Most importantly, we created a support network for military personnel who were facing the difficult choice between family loyalty and financial self-preservation. The program grew beyond anything I had imagined. Military bases across the country began requesting our workshops. Veterans organizations invited me to speak at their events. Military financial counselors started referring cases to us when they suspected family exploitation. Within a year, I was traveling regularly to speak at military installations, sharing my story and helping other service members recognize and respond to financial abuse. The work was emotionally demanding but incredibly rewarding. Every soldier who walked away from an exploitative family situation, every service member who established healthy financial boundaries, every veteran who rebuilt their life after family betrayal felt like a personal victory. My own family became a distant memory during this period. I'd moved, changed my phone numbers, and established a life that had no connection points to the people who'd raised me. Occasionally, I'd receive forwarded messages through military channels or old acquaintances, usually around holidays or family milestone events, but I deleted them without reading. The legal aftermath of their crimes had proceeded without my involvement once I'd provided my testimony. Both parents served their full sentences, emerging from prison to find their old life completely erased. Their house was gone, their social standing destroyed, their retirement years redefined by the consequences of their choices. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, but I felt no regret either. They'd made their choices with full knowledge of the consequences, just as I'd made mine. 2 years after my discharge, I received a call that would test my commitment to the boundaries I'd established. "Is this Cassandra Mitchell?" The voice was unfamiliar, professionally neutral. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Dr. Patricia Hayes from Cleveland General Hospital. I'm calling about your grandmother, Rose Mitchell. She's listed you as your emergency contact." My heart stopped. I'd maintained a relationship with my grandmother through cards and occasional phone calls, but I hadn't seen her since before my final deployment. She was the only family member I'd kept in my life, the only person who'd supported my decisions and respected my choices. "Is she okay?" "She's stable, but she's had a significant heart attack. She's asking for you." I was on a plane to Cleveland within hours. The woman I found in the hospital bed bore little resemblance to the strong, independent grandmother I remembered. She looked frail and small, connected to monitors and IV lines, but her eyes were still sharp and bright when she saw me. "Cassie," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "I was so afraid you wouldn't come." "Of course I came, Grandma. I'll always come when you need me."
We talked for hours, catching up on the years we'd missed, the life I'd built in Colorado, the work I was doing with veterans. She told me about her final years in the nursing home, how she'd used the recovered money to help other residents who couldn't afford basic necessities, how she'd followed my speaking career through online videos and news articles. "I'm so proud of you," she said as visiting hours ended. "You turned something terrible into something beautiful. You helped so many people." "I learned it from you, Grandma. You taught me that love means wanting the best for someone, even when that's hard or inconvenient." She squeezed my hand. "There's something I need to tell you about your parents." My body tensed. "Grandma, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. They've been trying to contact you through me. They write letters asking me to forward messages, asking for your address, asking me to tell them about your life." "What do you tell them?" "I tell them that if they want to talk to you, they need to earn the right. They need to demonstrate that they've changed, that they understand what they did wrong, that they're capable of having a relationship based on something other than taking from you." "And have they?" She was quiet for a long moment. "David writes about how sorry he is, about how prison changed him, about how he wants to make amends. Diane's letters are mostly about how unfair their situation is, how they're the victims of circumstances, how their children abandon them in their time of need." I wasn't surprised. My father had always been the follower, capable of change when properly motivated. My mother had always been the architect of the family's dysfunction, convinced that the world owed her the lifestyle she demanded. "Grandma, I need you to understand something. I'm never going to reconcile with them. What they did wasn't a mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a systematic betrayal that lasted for years. Even if they've changed, even if they're genuinely sorry, some things can't be forgiven." "I know, sweetheart. I just wanted you to know that the option exists if you ever change your mind." "I won't," she nodded, accepting my decision without argument or pressure. "Then I'll keep telling them what I've been telling them, that you're living a good life, that you're helping people, and that you're better off without them." Grandma Rose passed away peacefully 3 days later, with me holding her hand and her favorite hymns playing softly in the background. Her funeral was small and simple, attended by friends from the nursing home, a few distant relatives, and me.
My parents weren't there, though I learned later that they'd wanted to attend but had been advised by their parole officers that approaching me at a family funeral could be considered harassment. At the reading of her will, I discovered that my grandmother had left me her most treasured possession, a collection of letters and photographs documenting our family's history going back 4 generations. But more importantly, she'd left me a letter she'd written specifically for this moment. "My dear Cassandra," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're facing the reality of being the last Mitchell who understands what family is supposed to mean. Don't let that responsibility become a burden. You don't owe loyalty to people who never earned it. You don't owe forgiveness to people who never asked for it properly. You don't owe anything to anyone except yourself and the people who love you for who you are, not what you can provide." The letter continued, "I've watched you transform from a hurt young woman into someone who uses her pain to help others heal. That's the greatest legacy anyone can leave. Keep doing that work. Keep helping people find their strength. Keep showing them that it's possible to walk away from toxic family situations and build something better." She concluded, "The Mitchell family line doesn't end with you, sweetheart. It transforms. You get to decide what values and traditions are worth preserving and what patterns need to die with the people who created them. Choose wisely, but choose for yourself." I kept that letter in my wallet for months, reading it whenever I doubted my choices or wondered if I'd been too harsh in cutting off my parents completely. 3 years after my grandmother's death, my life had settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable and fulfilling. My work with military families had expanded into a consulting business that served veterans organizations nationwide. I'd completed my master's degree in engineering while maintaining my speaking schedule and advocacy work. I'd even started dating someone, a fellow veteran who understood the complexities of military life and the challenges of building civilian relationships after service.
David was a former Marine who'd served 3 tours in Iraq before transitioning to a career in renewable energy development. He was kind, stable, and refreshingly uncomplicated. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than drama or financial entanglement. When I told him about my family situation, he listened without judgment and then said something that surprised me. My family tried to pull similar stuff when I got back from deployment. Not as extreme as yours, but they definitely saw my military benefits as community property. It took me a while to realize that just because someone raised you doesn't mean they get to own you for life. It was the first relationship I'd ever had where my partner understood that setting boundaries with family wasn't selfish or cruel, it was necessary for survival. We'd been dating for 18 months when he suggested we take a weekend trip to Denver for a veterans conference. The event featured speakers from across the military community, workshops on various aspects of veteran life, and networking opportunities for people working in veteran services. What I didn't know was that David had coordinated with the conference organizers to surprise me with a special recognition award for my work in military family financial advocacy. When they called my name during the closing ceremony, I was genuinely shocked. The award recognized my contributions to military family financial literacy and my advocacy for service members facing family exploitation. The presenter read a citation that summarized my journey from victim to advocate, emphasizing how I'd transformed personal trauma into community service. But the real surprise came when David joined me on stage. "Cassandra," he said, taking the microphone, "you've spent the last 5 years helping military families build healthy, honest relationships. You've shown thousands of people that it's possible to walk away from toxic situations and create something better." He got down on one knee, pulling out a small black box. "I want to start a family with you. A real family, built on respect and honesty and genuine love. Will you marry me?" The audience of veterans and military advocates erupted in cheers as I said yes, crying happy tears for what felt like the first time in my adult life. Our wedding was everything my parents had claimed to want for Marcus, but had never actually provided. A celebration of genuine love, attended by people who truly cared about us, focused on the commitment rather than the performance. We held it at a small mountain lodge outside Colorado Springs, with a guest list that included fellow veterans, colleagues from our advocacy work, and friends who'd become our chosen family. My grandmother would have loved it. As I walked down the aisle toward David, wearing a simple dress I'd chosen because it made me feel beautiful, rather than because it would impress anyone, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed my future had ultimately led me to discover my true calling, to find genuine love, and to build a life based on my own values, rather than other people's expectations. The officiant, a retired military chaplain who'd served with both David and me at different times, spoke about the difference between the families we're born into and the families we choose to build. He talked about how military service teaches us to distinguish between loyalty that strengthens us and loyalty that weakens us, between duty that serves a greater good and obligation that serves only exploitation. During our vows, I promised David that I would never use his love as a weapon against him, never manipulate his loyalty for my own benefit, never take his sacrifices for granted. He made the same promises to me, and I believed him because I'd learned to recognize the difference between words and actions, between performance and authenticity. Our first year of marriage was blissfully ordinary. We bought a house together, combining our finances transparently and with mutual consent. We developed routines and traditions that belonged only to us. We supported each other's careers and personal growth without keeping score or demanding sacrifices. Most importantly, we began planning for children with the same intentionality we'd brought to everything else in our relationship. We talked extensively about the kind of parents we wanted to be, the values we wanted to instill, the patterns we wanted to break from our respective family histories. When our daughter was born 2 years later, we named her Hope Rose Mitchell Patterson, carrying forward my grandmother's memory while establishing our own family identity. Holding her for the first time, I felt a fierce protectiveness that went beyond anything I'd experienced before. This child would grow up knowing she was loved for who she was, not what she could provide. She would learn about healthy boundaries, about genuine relationships, about the difference between being needed and being used. She would understand that family is defined by care and respect, not blood and obligation. On Hope's first birthday, I received a card addressed to the Patterson family with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my mother's handwriting. "Congratulations on your beautiful daughter. I hope someday you'll let us be part of your life. We've changed and we miss you terribly." I showed it to David, who read it silently and then asked, "How do you feel about this?" I thought about it for a moment, watching our daughter play with her birthday toys, surrounded by friends who'd become our chosen family. "I feel nothing," I said, and realized it was true. No anger, no sadness, no guilt, no longing, just nothing. "That's probably healthy," David said. "They had their chance to be grandparents. They chose to be thieves instead." I threw the card away without responding, and we went back to celebrating our daughter's birthday with people who genuinely loved her without expecting anything in return. 5 years later, my family financial advocacy program had become a nationally recognized resource for military personnel dealing with family exploitation. We'd helped thousands of service members establish healthy financial boundaries, recover stolen benefits, and build lives free from family-based financial abuse. The program had grown beyond my individual efforts, employing a team of counselors, legal advocates, and financial planners who specialized in military family dynamics. We'd established partnerships with military bases, veterans organizations, and legal aid societies across the country. Most rewarding was the feedback we received from the people we'd helped. Letters from soldiers who'd broken free from family financial abuse, photos from veterans who'd bought their first homes with money they'd protected from exploitation, and updates from military families who'd learned to support each other without sacrificing individual financial security. Each success story felt like validation of the choice I'd made years ago to walk away from a family that saw my service as their personal profit center. On a warm spring day in Colorado, as I watched Hope play in our backyard with David, I reflected on the life I'd built from the ashes of the life I'd lost. The house we owned free and clear, purchased with money I'd earned through honest work. The marriage based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The daughter who would grow up understanding her worth wasn't measured by what she could give others. The career that turned personal pain into community healing. My parents had tried to steal my future, and in defending it, I'd discovered a future better than anything I'd originally imagined. They wanted me to be their ATM, their safety net, their permanent source of financial support. Instead, I'd become someone who helped other people escape the exact trap they'd set for me. The irony was perfect, the justice was complete, and the victory was mine. That evening, as I tucked Hope into bed and read her a story about a brave princess who saved herself, I realized that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes the greatest revenge is building a life so good, so authentic, so filled with genuine love and purpose, that what they tried to take from you becomes irrelevant compared to what you gained by refusing to let them take it. I'd won the war for my life by choosing to fight for something worth winning. The right to be loved without being exploited, the freedom to build relationships based on respect rather than utility, and the power to define family as the people who celebrate your success rather than those who profit from your sacrifice. My name is Cassandra Mitchell Patterson, and I am exactly who I chose to become.